Hi, Hollis.
Hi, Kels.
How's it going down in Mexico?
It's going really well. I'm in the air-conditioned creature comforts of my home right now. So nice. It's so nice.
Great. So we are interviewing and having a chat with Hollis Baley today, but before we get into who she is, we're going to start, as we always do, by doing some orientation, which is a somatic experiencing practice and exercise that we always do in every session. And to do that, we just allow our eyes to wander around the space that we're in, if that is appropriate for you and what you're doing right now. And really let your eyes get curious about what's around you. So again, letting your eyes guide you versus you trying to find things with the mind. See if you can just let your eyes be attracted to something that's moving or a color. And just notice how this makes your body feel. Notice what happens with the breath. And notice what your eyes are attracted to. What are the qualities that thing, one thing or few things your eyes are attracted to? And that might change. You might be curious about one thing and then it might change to something else. Right now I'm watching two stellar jays dance around the tree and outside my window here. So just allow yourself now to close your eyes and really draw in your space and start to explore your inner landscape, just like your eyes were curious, but let your awareness now be curious of what's going on. Just noticing and not attaching to. Noticing how the qualities of what your eyes were attracted to show up for you in your body. Taking a few more deep breaths. And then slowly opening the eyes. Good. So I'm excited to be talking with my good friend Hollis today. She has been one of my practitioners on my healing journey in the last couple of years. We met in Pacific City, Oregon, just down the road from where I live now. And she is a really fun friend to have. We go surfing together. We talk about food. We talk about healing. We practice communication together. And she really is a living example of what she offers. And Hollis is a nutritional therapy practitioner and a certified health coach and a free spirit foodie, which is her online community, which I'm a part of, which I love being a part of. And she has had many different trainings to support her within those realms of nutritional therapy, including muscle testing and many other things. She's an expert in the field of nutrition for addicts and nutrition for autoimmune disease. She first studied biology at Oregon State University and then soon after got her nutritional therapy certification. And her business really supports women specifically. She's working with women, which is great. We like that. And it really is focused around the autoimmune disorders and also healing any addictions that can be sort of hindering those autoimmune disorders. So as we both know and have experienced through our own past, that when we say addictions, it's kind of a broad thing. It can be food, it can be sugar, it can be any sort of substance or behavior that we start to use as comfort to support ourselves to be able to deal with some of the health challenges we're facing. So Hollis has been helping me over the past 2 years work with my chronic illness, and which is now finally becoming healed and a little bit more, yay, and a little bit easier for me to deal with. And I'm sure that will come up in our conversation. But I'm just excited to talk about today about nutrition and how it is, it really is a part, it's one of the foundational pieces, I believe, and I know that you believe, around healing. And when we talk about healing, we always talk about it from a holistic perspective. And nutrition it can be one of the most challenging areas that we have to focus, especially when we're healing an autoimmune disease or something else that's chronic or an addiction. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about that. Do you have anything else to share around what you do, or where you are right now and what you're focusing on?
That was a great intro. Thanks, Kelsey.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's where I'm at. It just, nutrition has been such a huge part of, it really was the foundational piece for me
Mm-hmm.
when I started to study nutrition and accelerating my healing process. And, as far as an introduction goes, you kind of summed up everything that I do, and I'm excited to get into the interview.
Yeah. Okay, great. So there's a reason why Hollis specializes in addiction and autoimmune disorders. And that's not only because her clients are presenting that, but it's also because she's had her own experience with it. So I'd love for you to share how you came to sort of your back history and why nutrition became such a big part of your healing journey, and sort of really that sounds like it was that first step for you to really focus on your healing.
Yeah. So it's been fascinating over the last, 10 years or however many years since I got into, since I did my first cleanse, really nutritional cleanse with a naturopath, just piecing the parts together, and kind of, I was sick, but I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
I was having symptoms like anxiety and depression. I knew I was anxious, and I knew I was susceptible to being depressed, and certainly had all these addictive behaviors that even with the recovery work that I'd done from being in my early 20s and having been introduced to recovery work, I just couldn't figure out why I was so prone to having addictive behaviors. So I started to put the puzzle pieces together, and that really takes me all the way back to when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been fun to look back and think about, even when I was born, my parents took me to my first gastroenterologist when I was 4.
Mm-hmm.
And, having had digestive problems my entire life, I remember in high school, was a huge part of the reason I developed eating disorders in high school, was because I always had this bloated belly. That, I was just didn't have any idea that there was something actually going on in my body that wasn't healthy. And so that's really where I take it back to in the womb. Even my mom was really unhealthy when she was pregnant with me, and so I was born unhealthy with an unhealthy body. And even though I was able to get by and was really athletic and was good in school, there was all this imbalance being made worse by my diet, of course, and going on into college, drugs and alcohol, and so that kind of, the stage was set from early on, and it didn't really occur to me that I had something wrong with me. I've never been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, but I treat my body, and a lot of people, I've treated a lot of clients this way too, as if I have an autoimmune disease, because these protocols just work so well to anti-inflame our bodies. And so I got a little off track there, but
that's okay. It's good. It's all good stuff.
That's kind of
where it all began.
And it wasn't all physical by any means. The emotional part was feeding into that dis-ease too. You talk about trauma a lot, and I'd never really heard the word trauma. I don't even know if I talked about it much or put it that way until I met you, actually. And then, and, you know, doing some research into what that means and what traumas can do to us. And especially you talk about the nervous system. It's like that emotional trauma for me was certainly growing up in an angry household. I mean, my parents are amazing, but man, did they fight. And we, you know, we were exposed to that, my brother and I, growing up. And that certainly left a mark on my body. It put me into a stress state. So I think the combination of being in that stress state, being around the anger and the rage and constantly kind of like walking on eggshells, not really knowing, you know, when and where something was going to explode, that really stuck with me. And I took that on with me into high school. And in high school, I was that angry, ragey teenager. And then I used eating disorders to cope in high school. And then getting into college, it was drugs and alcohol. That was really easy and accessible and took the pain away. So that stuff all worked for a good amount of time until I was 23. And by the time I hit 23, I had the drugs and alcohol weren't working anymore. And this was way before all the nutrition education, way before I had any tools to deal with anything. And I knew I needed help, and I was actually starting to delve into some of the spiritual books, and I was getting into astrology, and I'd always loved rocks and crystals, and that was you know, something that was special to me. But I knew I needed help. So I went to rehab at 23, and that was kind of the beginning of my emotional journey in terms of healing and really just starting to figure out what it all meant. And then fast forward a few years, I found nutrition, but it was interesting because when I was going through the drugs and alcohol phase, I was studying biology. And I was always curious about why, because I hung out with a bunch of people who did drugs, and I was attracted to this certain kind of drug. I was an uppers girl. And I was always curious about like why that worked for me and why other people craved other things. And so I think that's where the seed was planted in terms of nutritional healing, was because it was working. Like it was doing something in my body that was serving me well. It wasn't just because I wanted to be fucked up all the time. That was, you know, that was part of it sometimes, but it was actually serving a great purpose for me. So getting into, I was introduced to nutrition in my mid-20s through my first naturopath. And she introduced me to cleansing and gut healing. And I found so much relief from doing that cleanse and cutting out all of these really toxic foods and doing the supplement thing. And that was the first time I experienced an anxiety relief without medication. And it was really profound.
Yeah. You know, I think that is such an important piece to touch on, just with the addiction piece, and that how like that substance we're giving ourselves is serving a purpose. And I just like to, you know, you to expand on what do you feel that purpose was for you? Because I think that's so key, where we tend to get caught up in the substance being this like bad thing that's just destroying ourselves, and you know, but it's always serving some purpose. There's always something there that's giving us that is positive. It's just not the best thing for us. So what was that doing for you? What purpose was it serving for you?
Yeah, I am, you know, and just to touch on the emotional piece before I get into this, because this was really nutritional for me last year, but going back and making that connection that drug was actually serving a purpose for me, gave me a chance to really forgive myself. And I held myself under this wall of shame and guilt, and I'm just a horrible person, I'm so prone to addictions, blah blah blah. But when I finally made this this connection that I'll go into
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that drug serving a purpose, it was like I could just let go of that.
Beautiful.
So that's really powerful. And
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that drug or that behavior serving a purpose, I mean, in my case, it was uppers. You know, it was pain, meth, Adderall, whatever. You know, give me an upper, and it made me feel normal.
Mm-hmm.
It made me anxious. It brought me into the present moment. It made me be able to get things done, and I truly believe, just with my educational background and my experience, that was a chemical imbalance in my body that had, you know, the stage had been set a long time ago with the digestive issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I work from, is really a digestion being a foundation. That's not the only way to do it. It's just the way I look at it. And having chronic digestive disorders over time, for a lifetime, essentially, your vitamins are being drained, your minerals are being drained, your hormones are being sent out of whack. And there are certain chemicals in your body that just aren't being produced.
Mm-hmm.
If you are consuming them, they aren't being absorbed and utilized in the body. So, you know, those uppers were supplying me with serotonin and dopamine and some other good brain chemicals, and obviously, you know, the rush and endorphins that cause them to be very addictive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, and this whole understanding, and, you know, those are uppers. Every class of drugs and chemicals that we get dependent on kind of serves their own purpose in our body. They produce their own class of endorphins. They produce their own class of hormones. And people that are either sick physically or sick emotionally or have experienced trauma often are chemical, have a chemical imbalance. So those things work really well for a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was the same way. The uppers were what I was into, you know, being a cocaine addict for many years. I felt more like myself on when I was high than when I wasn't. And it's also the similar story to me of I had digestive issues since I was a baby, you know, so it does, you know, when I met you and because I always came in from the emotional side of, you know, and when I met you and we started really exploring this, with you. I was like, oh, you know, I had food allergies when I was a kid that, you know, I didn't know about. And I had irritable bowel syndrome for my whole teenagehood. And, you know, I also grew up in an angry household, not just my immediate family, and but like some of my relatives, and there was just a lot of anger around me. And you know, we always look at that as, you know, when the kid has digestive issues, it's literally represents not being able to digest the life they have around them. They're, you know, when you're in a state of like, oh, I don't know what to do, or I have to keep the peace, you're in that sympathetic state where your digestion is literally shut off, because that's what happens. It's the first thing that shuts down when your body spikes into that sympathetic state. And if you don't have a chance to be in your parasympathetic state, even when you're sleeping, sometimes that doesn't happen. If you're constantly on edge, that you could be involved with something. So, yeah, I read this book a little while ago. I think it was like a CD. It was like not a little while ago. It was like, I think over 10 years ago, when CDs were still the thing. It was like a book on CD. And the woman said how she kind of went through a few different substances and said how they give you something like, say, psychedelics increases your vision and your creative side, and all these different things. So I really love that you brought that up, because I think it's an important piece to look at, especially around substance and how, and like why we're set up to even go after that, even when maybe addiction isn't even in our family. You know, some people are genetically predisposed to being set up that way, but maybe you're genetically predisposed because of the health issues you have in your body.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then knowing that drug history or things, if it's a chemical dependency, makes treatment really effective. I mean, it makes my job a lot easier because I recognize those chemicals that they're likely deficient in.
Right, exactly. Wow. Yeah, I never thought about that too, because that kind of sets you can look at that pattern and know almost right away what they're lacking potentially as a client. Yeah. So when you found nutrition and you sort of started getting relief through nutrition, how was that for you, and how did that inspire you to then go on, study it, and now be offering it, and now be like have it as the foundation of your career?
Yeah, it was, I mean, looking back on it, it was a lot of divine intervention. But it all happened for a reason. And like I said, that seed was planted in terms of the physiology and the body and like nutrients and things like that. Even though it wasn't food, I was thinking in terms of drugs and chemicals. Yeah. But I had that background in biology, and that was always fascinating to me. But in my mid-20s, I ended up, my grandma got put into the hospital. So there was this stress experience. It was actually very traumatic dealing with my dad's side of the family, and my grandma getting put in the hospital, and all that stress caused me to lose my vision. I was just having these bouts of blurry vision, and it was crazy. It was it wasn't out of the blue. It was something stressful would happen. I would get a call at work, or I would wake up and just be in a stress state all of a sudden, and I would have blurry vision. So I went to see my first naturopath, and she immediately after taking my health history and hearing my childhood and, the digestive disorders that I never thought about before, she just put me on this cleanse. It was called a leaky gut cleanse for 30 days, basically protein, really good high quality animal proteins and vegetables. And I kind of thought she was crazy, but at the same time, that's where the divine intervention comes in, because I knew walking out of that office that it sounded nuts. And if I were to tell anyone about this, like, especially my parents who are in the Western medical world, and like, they're going to think I'm crazy. But a part of me really knew that this was going to work, and this was the answer. And I was like, just really confident in doing this. And I set out and I did it. And within 7 days of doing the protocol, which was not calorie or quantity restricted at all, my vision came back.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And
so were you like completely blind, or could you see a little bit, or?
It wasn't complete. I mean, I could get around for sure. It wasn't like I was couldn't walk around or anything, but my vision was so blurry. I was working on the computer and I couldn't see the computer screen. And I couldn't really drive because I couldn't see street signs. So it was pretty scary.
Yeah, that would be scary.
And a little bit of the details, she did actually do some diagnostics, and she found that my digestive system was just full of yeast and parasites and all kinds of bacterial infections. And that was just eye-opening to me. I was like, wow. And so I started buying books.
Yeah.
And I did that 30-day protocol, and I was taking anti-anxiety medication at the time, antidepressants. I think I had 2 anti-anxiety meds and a sleeping pill, and then an antidepressant. And I just kind of was like, I don't think I need this as much anymore. I didn't go off my medication then, but it was notable, the difference in my anxiety and my moods, and just being able to, for me, it's always been this social anxiety that I get in a group and then something will trigger me and I'll just kind of freeze up. And I remember during that cleanse, I mean, here I was sober, everyone around me, I was still hanging out with a lot of people who drank, and so my girlfriends were coming over after work and they were drinking wine, and I was sober and I felt great. I was like, oh, I can just sit here and feel anxiety free. So that first cleanse made a big impression on me. And then I I ended up getting into a toxic relationship, which was another great teacher. And then to get out of that relationship, it just came to me that I wanted to go back to school and study nutrition. I'd been reading the books. I'd been doing a lot of work in terms of experimenting with dietary protocols, doing cleanses. I hooked on the cleanse thing. But yeah, when I went back to school, it was really to get out of that relationship. And I wasn't very happy in my salary job. And within the first, it was kind of split into 3 sections. Within that first trimester, I had decided that I had to do this for a living. It was making such a profound impact on me, and I wanted to share it with other people.
Mm-hmm. And thank goodness you did, because I have benefited and I get to see, living in the community where Hollis used to live, I get to see a lot of people walking around who are feeling a lot healthier because of the work that you're doing with them. Yeah. So, well, great. I mean, it's interesting how, sometimes we need those big health sort of almost rock bottoms to kind of come up before we're like, okay, I'm going to be open to someone who I think is crazy telling me to go do a cleanse, because I just know that this is going to work. And if you hadn't had that, loss of vision, you might not have ended up in that space and been able to really commit to that, and it works on sort of an emotional level too. I think we have these like emotional moments where they're like pivotal moments where we're like, okay, I'm willing to do what it takes. And you kind of connect more to your intuition in that place too, because you're like, I want to do it right, and you're not just necessarily going to do anything, even though it sometimes feels like that, like I will do anything in this moment. And yeah.
There's so many layers. I mean, I was really emotionally traumatized at the time when I started losing my vision and after that relationship. And it just, nutrition is, I mean, for me and for you, it's part of the deal now. It's like, it's no magic thing. And you know what? I can eat as good as I want to, but if I'm not dealing with my emotions, like I really stepped into the work with you and doing the breath work and a little bit of the somatic experiencing, and you've known me over the last year, like really stepping into this emotion. Nutrition is just one part of it. Yeah. But I know, because I go off of my good diet often enough, I slip up and eat foods I'm allergic to, and man, the anxiety comes back like that, and it triggers me, and I kind of like sets me back a little bit. So I think just staying on a good nutrition protocol that works for you, and really making that integrated and a part of your life, that just allows the other stuff to surface. Yeah, totally. And it provides, because our bodies are like the foundation, right? That we talk about, like they're kind of like the root. We're connected to the earth, and if we don't, we can try. It's the same thing. It goes both ways. But really, I find if we don't support our bodies to be able to keep up with our emotional healing, we can kind of hit a plateau. And the same thing, if we don't keep our emotional health up and keep that practice going while we're healing our bodies, we can hit these plateaus and wonder, like, why is nothing working anymore? I've been doing all this work. So it really does go hand in hand. And I know that when you do some of your, like you do your little discovery sessions with people, you show them the nutrition wheel, and it has all different aspects of life, not just what we eat and not just how our relationships, but also our career, what we do for fun, all of those things. And it really is a whole piece to the puzzle. And it's, I do find that nutrition, it can be challenging. I'd maybe like to talk with that about you for a minute there, of like, I know it's been challenging for me, like really embracing the way I need to eat. And I know that you're an advocate for a kind of like an 80-20 rule, where we're 80% really taking care of ourselves, and then we have 20% wiggle room. But there's this
this piece of when the wiggle room is limited. Like for me, I can't eat dairy or gluten. I definitely have to I'm very moderate about my alcohol intake, and, having issues with alcohol in the past is something that I like to be careful with anyways. And, how do you support someone with their wiggle room when they're on sort of in a place where they really need to be careful about their wiggle room?
Yeah. Sometimes people come to me and it's like, I immediately know that we actually need to start talking about their partner or whatever's going on for them before we can even make any progress in regards to the nutrition. So everyone's so different, and everyone comes into their process, whether it be nutrition or emotional healing or whatever, in a different time, in a different space. And I think it's just, for some people who are really sick, we have to address nutrition first, because without that piece, their body's just going to be getting more and more sick. And man, I have had the greatest luck. I don't know. I feel like the luckiest person in the world, because I don't have many people who come to me who aren't willing to do the work.
Yes.
And so it's not too difficult. Now, that's not saying that I send someone home with, a super restricted diet and say, come see me in another couple months. We meet every week and every other week. That's just how the coaching goes, is keeping accountability. But for people without a lot of wiggle room, I think they feel it, and it takes trial and error. It's also important to know that, like, the person's not a bad person. I'm just going to use me. I'm not a bad person if I keep eating sugar every day for a week in a row, knowing it's bad for me. When that happens to me, I know darn good and well that there is something going on that I need to look at. So, and I'm not great at sitting down with myself, even just sitting and feeling into it. I have the tools, but sometimes that's really hard to do. And so I'll continue to reach for the sugar to numb out. And so that's not a bad thing. That's great information.
Great. Yeah.
It certainly sets the body back. Right. Just in my situation, dealing with infections, gut infections, chronic gut infections. 3 weeks, if I slip off for 3 or 4 weeks, that sets me months back. And that's not everybody. So, and I'm not going to sit there and tell a client that at our first meeting or whatever, because I think that's part of the process. I think that's everything happens for a reason. And that's a great thing to learn in your process is, you do so well for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden something derails you, and it's like, okay, well, what's going on? That's just another layer surfacing.
Yeah. Another opportunity to look at ourselves and support ourselves and love ourselves and forgive ourselves. And, I was listening to one of my teachers talk the other day, and she said and she's a huge health advocate. She was a health coach before she was a yoga teacher. And she says her obsession right now is gummy bears. She's like, they're the juice sweetened ones, and they have gelatin in them, so they're good for my hair, but that's her thing. Right. And she's like, she says, like, it's okay as long as, like, there's that period of time where we might need to do intensive work because we're really sick. And then after that, if we can just sort of maintain with that 80% of, whatever it is, and then 20% of the time you're doing little things, it actually sets you up so that you don't need to do such big, intense cleanses. Like, once you've addressed the deeper health issues and you find where your level of normal is, which is different for everyone, you can have those moments where, you just have a week where you overdo it, and then you get back to it, and it doesn't affect you as much as it used to in the past, when you're kind of unaware of your patterning and just kind of doing things spontaneously and not being aware of why you're reaching for the sugar.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'd like to talk a little bit about, before we talk about your amazing online community and what you do, I'd like to talk a little bit about how just sort of like your resources and your view around nutrition in supporting people who are dealing with addiction. I know that you wrote a little mini book that is soon to be a bigger book over this last winter. So I'd love to hear just a few thoughts from you around that.
Yeah. Well, I think when someone who's had an addiction history finally comes to the point of wanting to address nutrition, anyone who's been through an addiction to chemicals has an imbalance. Whether that's made a mark on their body has led to something as severe as an autoimmune disorder, or has just kind of kept them, fatigued and under energized. There's certainly a place and a necessity almost for good nutrition. So, depending on what the person's dealing with, I always like to start with just the basics. It's high quality, nutrient dense food is the foundation for everything. Mm-hmm. So no processed, packaged foods, no chemical laden stuff, organic when possible. High quality meats is so important because so many chemicals are in the farmed animals that we raise. And so just eliminating all the toxins and really getting comfortable with eating a nutrient dense diet is the foundation. Mm-hmm. And then stepping into that self-care piece. The little booklet is about, call it holistic nutrition, and all that really means is that there's more to food than nutrition. Mm-hmm. And the stuff we're talking about, really good self-care, getting enough sleep, loving and taking care of your emotions, and mm-hmm. Moving, and it's a whole variety of things that really feed us mm-hmm. and keep us well. Mm-hmm. So those are really as far as the foundation for any philosophy that I would follow. It would just be nutrient dense food and putting yourself before anything else. Because when we step into this path of healing, we do have to be really selfish. Mm-hmm. And I know as addicts are deemed as being selfish and all this other crap that people see us as, but there's a reason we become addicts, and we can do some pretty crappy things when we're in our addiction, but it's because of our conditioning, and mm-hmm. we really need to allow ourselves to forgive ourselves and put ourselves first. And mm-hmm. when we start caring for ourselves, and by putting good food in your body, and by getting enough sleep and doing a daily movement practice, your body starts to recognize that, and things will start to even out. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's so foundational, and you really, I think the key that really helps is you'll just be ready when you're ready. Like some people, I get a lot of people, because of my history with drug addiction and alcohol and the kind of life I used to live, I get a lot of people saying like, hey, I'm ready to, quit drinking, or I'm ready to stop doing drugs, or, and I'm like, that's great. Like what else can I do? And the first thing I say to them is connect to your why. Connect to why you're ready right now, and remember that. Because, like you said before, we're going to slip up from time to time, and we're going to, often when we step away from one substance, we replace it with another, and that's why, sugar addiction, I think, is the biggest issue we have in our world today, not the hard chemicals. And well, sugar can be considered a hard chemical if it's the really processed kind at this point. But so, I like how, it really is, it's not this complicated, hard thing. Like you said, it's eating good food and really loving yourself and taking care of yourself. And I think that you're a great example of that, in the way you live your life. And just putting yourself first, sometimes it's uncomfortable to do, but once you start doing it, it's actually feels really good after a while to be like, no, I don't, I'm going to say no to you so I can say yes to me, and learning to, how to take care of yourself while you're in service of others. You can still serve others and be a part of other people's lives and take care of your children or your partner or, your dogs or whatever, and still put yourself first. Mm-hmm. So I think another big piece of the healing from addiction with nutrition is also community and tribe. So that's why I want to talk about your online offering that you have, because often when people we attract and we hang out with people who are doing the same things as us. So when we start to make a change and do something different, sometimes we don't have community, or we have friends or people that we know that are, doing what we're doing. And so I love that you just started, which is a new thing. You just started it last month, this online community. So please tell us about it.
Yes, the community piece. I'm loving that you're bringing that up, because this was actually a big part of my story. Is I isolated myself for years, and I still have a tendency to do so. Mm-hmm. And it really was just the last year that I had this come to Jesus moment in terms of how important community and really finding and surrounding myself with people who connect with every part of my being. Mm-hmm. It matters. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. Like, I'm super happy as an independent woman, and I think I had to go through all those phases and like testing out different people and things during my 20s to figure out more of who I am. But this last year has really been about stepping into surrounding myself with the people that support me and feed me and push me to be better and don't allow me to slip up so much, and just really develop me as the person I am. And so the online community is called Free Spirited Foodie.
I love that name.
I don't know. I like the name, but it was.
I love it.
Thank you. It's really, so I do coaching, one-on-one coaching, and I've taught online classes for the last 3 years. So it was a way to combine those two offerings and have it set up in terms of a community for women where people can have access to me at a much more affordable rate and more often, just in the message board. And then hopefully by asking their questions and getting support in the group setting, that will help other women in the group as well. So I'm going to be teaching quarterly cleanses in that group and doing live Q&A and doing some of this, having some guest experts on to share their wisdom and stories. Mm-hmm. And it's evolving, but the one thing I kind of did, just kind of ran through my mind as we were closing up our conversation in terms of addiction, is the issue of food allergies. Mm-hmm. And as well as I do, that this can be a pretty detrimental thing. And one of the things that I do in every cleanse is we follow an elimination diet, and that helps people. Elimination diet is basically cutting out a certain number of foods, and it's like dairy, gluten, nuts and seeds, maybe eggs for some people, whatever they can part with. Mm-hmm. And then introducing them after 3 weeks, and then you get a clear reaction in terms of the food allergies. But the food allergies, for anyone dealing with anxiety or depression, mood disorders, this is a really important point, and one that's, it's sometimes not obvious, because it's oftentimes we don't just eat something and have a reaction, mm-hmm. a delayed reaction in the body. But I will say that when I finally eliminated the majority of my food allergies, that was when I was able to go off of the rest of my medications. Mm-hmm. And that was just this last winter. I went a little bit deeper and did a little bit more strict protocol for myself. And man, being a nutritionist for 3 years, having kind of been in denial to that, I can't believe the difference that it made. I mean, I just don't have anxiety anymore after finally getting rid of all those allergens. And so, you know, that's one more little nugget of wisdom for anyone out there listening who's dealing with chronic anxiety and any kind of chronic symptom, really, and especially the addiction to food, because certain things in food can cause cravings. So it's like you're not messed up because you can't put that down, or do you just keep reaching for the thing that might not be good for you? It's there are certain chemicals in our body that will crave that allergen. So I just kind of wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important piece. Yeah, it's huge, because when I stopped eating gluten, I realized, when I finally let that go a few years ago, I realized that I had this low-grade headache and nausea that I'd just been dealing with and not even paying attention to, and being in denial about it because I didn't want to stop eating gluten. And then when I did, I was like, I feel amazing. Like, there was just this, like, I was like, I don't feel nauseous every day, and this headache's gone, which I didn't even really pay that much attention to. You know, I just kind of shoved it down, or I'd take an Advil or something. And when I finally cleared gluten out of my body long enough that I could feel good, I was like, wow, you know, it totally makes a difference. And because I felt nauseous and had a headache, you know, I would try and like stuff it down with food, or have an extra glass of wine at night to kind of numb myself out. Instead of having one glass, I'd have two, because it like helped me numb a little bit more. And then when I stopped doing that, I was like, I just feel it's really amazing when you feel good, how you just only want to put good things in your body.
Yeah, and it's challenging to get there and to make that first step.
Totally.
But I think once people make that commitment and just do it, the results that's the telling factor, and that's what keeps you locked in. You feel so good. Yeah.
So we're going to post all of Holliss's information for all of you who are listening today, and you'll be able to join her community right through our website, but you'll also have links to her website. And she has an amazing blog, and her newsletter is always full of good recipes and tips and tools around eating food. And I'm excited to see what it is over the next little while, because she's potentially making a move to Mexico, part-time, maybe full-time. So we'll have lots of Southern influence and fun from her around that. And I just really encourage any of you who are looking for extra support in the nutrition realm to reach out to Hollis. She's full of information. We're definitely going to have her back on the podcast to talk about different, little bit more specifically around certain things that we're dealing with recovery and those aspects. And we also are collaborating in some future events together, which will be recovery-specific nutrition programs and cleanses. So I want to thank you so much, Hollis, for talking today. I always learn talking to you, so I love having conversations with you. And yeah, I just really appreciate all your wisdom and your willingness to show up and share your story, because it speaks so much to my own story. So it's always great to have that reflection.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Kelsey.
Wonderful.
It's always talking to you and seeing your face.
Yeah.
In person.
Great. Thanks so much, Hollis.
All right. Bye.
Bye.